The back rent you owe my father is $192,000, and that's before we calculate interest and property damage. Judge Harrison's words hung in the courtroom air as my ex-husband Derek's smugness melted faster than ice in July. But what transformed his shock into pure terror was when my father stood up in the gallery and announced, "Actually, Your Honor, I'd also like to file criminal charges for fraud. He's been collecting rent from our tenants in the basement apartment for 8 years and keeping the money." Derek's lawyer, the expensive one he'd bragged would destroy me, frantically shuffled through papers while Derek himself gripped the defendant's table like it might save him from drowning. "What tenants?" Derek sputtered. "What fraud? That's my house." Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Fitzgerald, you just spent 20 minutes telling this court how you've been the sole provider, maintaining your property, while your wife contributed nothing. Would you like to revise that statement?" I sat quietly beside my lawyer, Sarah Chin, watching 8 years of lies unravel like a cheap sweater. The house, our supposed marital home, had never been ours. It had always been Dad's, a fact Derek had somehow missed despite living there, renovating it, and apparently running a secret rental operation in the basement. "Your Honor," Derek's lawyer, Mr. Brennan, stood up, his $3,000 suit suddenly looking less impressive. "We need a recess. There's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Sarah interjected smoothly, "is that Mr. Fitzgerald believed he could claim ownership of property he never purchased, never inherited, and never had any legal right to. Here's the deed, dated April 2016, showing sole ownership by Martin Cross, my client's father." She handed copies to the judge and opposing counsel. I watched Derek's face cycle through confusion, anger, and finally, dawning horror. "Additionally," Sarah continued, "we have 8 years of bank records showing Mr. Fitzgerald collecting $2,000 monthly rent from the basement apartment, money that rightfully belongs to the property owner, Mr. Cross." "That's a lie." Derek shot to his feet. "There's no basement apartment." My father, all 72 years of him, stood up in the gallery. "Really, son? Then who's been living downstairs for the past 8 years? Ghosts." Judge Harrison gavelled for order. "Mr. Cross, you'll have your chance to speak. Mr. Fitzgerald, sit down." Derek collapsed into his chair. I could see his mind racing, probably trying to figure out how I discovered his secret. He'd been so careful, meeting the tenants when I was at work, depositing the rent into a separate account, filing taxes that I never saw. He probably thought he was brilliant. He hadn't counted on my dad playing the long game. "Your Honor," Sarah said, "I'd like to present Exhibit B, text messages between Mr. Fitzgerald and the current tenant, Ms. Jennifer Wu, discussing rent collection and property maintenance." Derek's phone. The one he'd guarded like Fort Knox throughout our marriage. The one he'd forgotten to wipe before turning it over during discovery because he was too focused on hiding his girlfriend's messages. Sarah read aloud. "December 3rd, Ms. Wu. The water heater is acting up again. Mr. Fitzgerald. I'll come by tomorrow while my wife's at work. Remember, she doesn't know about the apartment, so don't answer the door if anyone else knocks. February 15th, Ms. Wu. Rent's in the usual account. Mr. Fitzgerald. Perfect. Remember, all communication goes through me, not the old man upstairs." Old man. I glanced at Dad, who was smiling like a chess player who'd just cornered a king. "Your Honor," Mr. Brennan tried again. "My client believed he had an arrangement with Mr. Cross." "An arrangement?" Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Mr. Fitzgerald, did you have written permission to collect rent on Mr. Cross's property?" Derek mumbled something. "Speak up, Mr. Fitzgerald." "No, Your Honor." "Did you have verbal permission?" Mr. Cross knew about it." My father stood again. "Your Honor, may I address that?" Judge Harrison nodded. "I absolutely knew about it," Dad said, causing Derek to look momentarily hopeful. I knew because I installed security cameras in the common areas 3 years ago, when things started going missing from my workshop. Imagine my surprise when I saw my son-in-law sneaking tenants in and out like a teenager breaking curfew. Derek went pale. But here's the interesting part, Dad continued. I didn't stop him. Want to know why? The courtroom was silent. Because my daughter called me crying one night, saying Derek wouldn't let her see the bank statements. Said he was handling all the finances and she should just trust him. That's when I knew something was off. So I let him keep digging his hole while I documented everything. Dad, I whispered, but he wasn't done. 8 years of rent at $2,000 a month. That's $192,000 he stole from me. But more importantly, it's 8 years he lied to my daughter, telling her they were broke, making her work overtime while he pocketed $24,000 a year tax-free. I paid taxes on it. Derek protested. Sarah smiled. You did. Under what address? Because according to your tax returns, you only reported income from your salary and investments. Nothing about rental income. Derek's lawyer put his head in his hands. Judge Harrison looked through the documents. Mr. Fitzgerald, setting aside the rent issue for a moment, you've been claiming in these divorce proceedings that the house is marital property. You've stated under oath that you purchased it with your inheritance from your grandmother. Is that correct? Aye. There might have been some confusion. Yes or no, Mr. Fitzgerald? Did you testify that you purchased this house? Yes. Yet the deed clearly shows Mr. Cross as the owner, purchased before you even met Ms. Cross. How do you explain this? Derek looked at his lawyer desperately. Mr. Brennan stood. Your Honor, my client may have been confused about the technical ownership. Confused? Judge Harrison's voice could have frozen fire. Counselor, your client submitted financial documents claiming ownership of a property worth $450,000. That's not confusion, that's fraud. Furthermore, Sarah added, Mr. Fitzgerald has been claiming the mortgage interest deduction on his taxes for a property he doesn't own and isn't paying a mortgage on, since Mr. Cross owns the house outright. That was news to me. I turned to stare at Derek, who was now sweating through his shirt. Your Honor, Sarah continued, we'd like to amend our filing. In addition to standard divorce proceedings, we're seeking full restitution for the stolen rent money, penalties for tax fraud, and damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress. This is insane. Derek exploded. I improved that house. I renovated the kitchen, finished the basement, maintained everything. With whose money? Dad asked from the gallery. My money. Really? Sarah pulled out another document. Because these receipts show all renovation materials were purchased with Ms. Cross's credit card. The one you had access to but told her was maxed out from household expenses. I remembered those conversations. Derek insisting we couldn't afford dinner out because we were over budget, while apparently funding renovations with my credit and keeping rent money for himself. Your Honor, Mr. Brennan made one last attempt. Perhaps we could discuss a settlement. A settlement? Judge Harrison looked incredulous. Mr. Brennan, your client has admitted to fraud, theft, and perjury in my courtroom. The only settlement he should be discussing is with the district attorney. Derek turned to me then, his eyes pleading. Grace, baby, tell them this is a misunderstanding. You know I love you. You know everything I did was for us. I stood for the first time since entering the courtroom. For us? You told me we couldn't afford to have a baby because money was too tight. You made me sell my grandmother's jewelry to help with bills. You convinced me to skip my brother's destination wedding because we couldn't afford it. All while you were collecting $2,000 a month in stolen rent. It wasn't stolen. I maintained the property. You maintained it with my money, my credit cards, while telling me I was bad with finances and needed you to handle everything. Sarah put a gentle hand on my arm, and I sat back down, shaking. Judge Harrison had seen enough. Here's my ruling. The house located at 47 Maple Drive is and has always been the sole property of Martin Cross. Mr. Fitzgerald has no claim to it and must vacate within 30 days. 30 days? Derek protested. Where am I supposed to go? That's not the court's concern. Furthermore, Mr. Fitzgerald will pay Mr. Cross $192,000 in back rent, plus interest at the statutory rate. He will also pay Ms. Cross the full balance of credit card charges related to home improvements. She looked at Sarah, who supplied $47,000. $47,000 in credit card charges, plus interest and penalties. The divorce is granted on grounds of fraud and financial abuse. Ms. Cross is awarded all marital assets except Mr. Fitzgerald's personal belongings and vehicle. But that's everything. Derek's voice cracked. The bank accounts, the investments. The bank accounts funded by stolen rent money? The investments made while telling your wife you were broke. Yes, Mr. Fitzgerald, that's everything. Your Honor. Sarah spoke up. There's also the matter of criminal charges. Judge Harrison nodded. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for prosecution on charges of fraud, theft, tax evasion, and perjury. Mr. Fitzgerald, I suggest you retain criminal counsel. Derek slumped in his chair, defeated. His lawyer was already packing up, probably calculating how to get paid since Derek's assets were about to be frozen. As we left the courtroom, Dad caught up to us in the hallway. You okay, sweetheart? You knew, I said, not sure if I was angry or amazed. You knew for 3 years and didn't tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would Derek have convinced you I was a meddling old man trying to break up your marriage? He took my hands. I needed evidence. Solid, undeniable evidence. Besides, you weren't ready to leave 3 years ago. He was right. 3 years ago, I was still believing Derek's lies, still thinking I was the problem, still trying to make him happy. The tenants, I said suddenly. Jennifer Wu, is she real? Dad chuckled. Very real. Lovely woman, accountant. She's been documenting everything too, hoping someone would eventually help her. Turns out Derek's been overcharging her and pocketing the difference from what he told her the rent was. How much was he really supposed to charge? $1,500. He's been telling her the rent was $2,000 and keeping the extra $500. Another $6,000 a year. My head spun with the math of Derek's deceptions. Grace, Sarah touched my arm. We need to freeze the accounts immediately, before he can move any money. We spent the next 2 hours at the bank, securing accounts I didn't even know existed. Derek had checking accounts, savings accounts, investment portfolios, all funded by his theft, all hidden from me during our marriage. The total was staggering. $380,000. How? I asked the bank manager. How did I not know about any of this? The accounts were in his name only, she explained. And all statements were electronic, going to an email address you probably didn't have access to. By the time we finished, word had gotten out. My phone was buzzing with texts from mutual friends who'd been in the courtroom gallery. Derek's sister called, screaming about family loyalty, until I told her about the theft, and she went quiet. That evening, I sat in my apartment, my temporary apartment, since I'd moved out of Dad's house thinking Derek and I owned it, and tried to process everything. 8 years of marriage built on lies. 8 years of feeling like a failure because we were struggling financially. 8 years of Derek's generosity to his friends, his expensive hobbies, his insistence that I was bad with money, while he literally stole from my father. Dad arrived with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. Figured you might not feel like cooking. We ate in companionable silence until I finally asked, "Why didn't you ever say you owned the house? Even before Derek?" He sighed. "Your mother and I bought that house when you were 2. When she died, I couldn't bear to live there alone, so I rented it out. When you got engaged, I thought it would be perfect. You could live in your childhood home, build your own family there. I was going to surprise you, put it in your name as a wedding gift. But then I met Derek. Really met him, not the charming facade. I saw how he looked at the house, calculating its value. How he mentioned investment opportunities before he even proposed. So I kept it in my name, figuring I'd transfer it to you eventually, when I was sure. And you were never sure. No, sweetheart, I was sure. Sure he was wrong for you. But you loved him, and I had to let you figure it out yourself. The fortune cookies arrived with the check. Mine read, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. 3 months later, Derek was arraigned on multiple charges. He pled guilty to avoid trial, receiving 5 years probation, community service, and orders to pay full restitution. He had to sell his car, his boat, I hadn't even known about the boat, and liquidate all the hidden investments. Jennifer Wu testified about the rent scheme. Turns out she wasn't the first tenant. Derek had been running this scam since year 1 of our marriage, rotating tenants every few years, always choosing young professionals who worked long hours and wouldn't ask questions. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday. I walked out of the courthouse owning nothing I hadn't earned myself, plus damages that would help me rebuild. Derek walked out facing monthly restitution payments that would take him 20 years to complete. "You ruined my life," he spat at me on the courthouse steps. "No," I replied calmly. "You ruined your own life. I just found the receipts." Dad was waiting by his car. "So about that house. Keep it in your name," I said firmly. "I want to buy my own place. With my own money. No lies, no schemes, no secrets." He smiled. "That's my girl. Although Jennifer's lease is up next month if you want a roommate. She's looking for a new place, somewhere her landlord isn't a criminal." I thought about it. A fellow victim of Derek's schemes. Someone who understood the betrayal, sharing a fresh start. Give her my number, I decided. 6 months later, Jennifer and I moved into a townhouse downtown. My name on the deed, my credit rebuilding, my life finally my own. Dad still owned the Maple Drive house, now properly managed by a legitimate property company. Derek, last I heard, was living with his mother, working 2 jobs to make restitution payments, and telling anyone who'd listened that his ex-wife had trapped him. But I had the receipts that said otherwise. All $192,000 worth of them.